How would I describe Alice Childress? Well, Alice Childress was a playwright and a novelist and a performer and a director.
Born in Charleston, South Carolina, the great-granddaughter of a slave, Alice Childress became a writer of keenly observed, funny, uncompromising plays. More than 70 years after her first play, she's been rediscovered with new productions on Broadway and across America. She started as an actress with the American Negro Theater, working alongside future stars like Sidney Poitier and Ruby Dee. But Alice was frustrated by the lack of good parts.
There weren't great roles written for Black women. This was, shocking. There weren't great roles. And legend has it, and I think it has been confirmed by him at one point, by Sidney Poitier, who said, well, you go do it. In 2 days, she brought back Florence.
I'll be here.
The play that Alice brought back, her very first, was Florence. It takes place deep in the Jim Crow South in a segregated waiting room. Like many of her plays to come, it features a strong Black woman.
Howdy, ma'am.
A white woman, Mrs. Carter, strikes up a conversation with her, describing a scene from a new book which she says is all about your people.
Just before she jumped.
You mean she killed herself?
Of course! Close your eyes and picture it.
Yes.
Now, she's standing there on the bridge in the moonlight, and out of her shabby purse she takes a mirror. And by the light of the moon, she looks at her reflection in the mirror.
I can see it, just as plain.
Tears roll down her cheeks as she says, almost white, but I'm Black. I'm a Negro. And then she jumps and drowns herself.
Why?
She can't face it, living in a world where she almost belongs, but not quite. Oh, it's so tragic.
That ain't so. Not one bit it ain't.
But it is.
I know it ain't.
It's not that Mrs. Carter isn't trying, and I think a lot of people today are trying, white people are trying to understand what it means to be Black, but keep stepping in it. And that feels so present in the play at the time and still a constant thing that we're gonna have to deal with just because of our history in this country. And it's a muscle that we have to keep exercising of checking our assumptions.
She found that she wasn't going to get to play the kind of roles that she wanted, so she could write them.
I mustn't hurt you, must I?
In 1955, Alice wrote a brilliant satire called Trouble in Mind that premiered off-Broadway. It was a play about slavery within a play about putting on a show. It was a hit.
It was immediately optioned for Broadway. It was supposed to go to Broadway in 1957. She was going to be the first Black woman to be produced on Broadway. And they wanted more changes, and they wanted more changes, and they wanted more changes. And finally, she just said, no, I can't. So by the time she got to Wedding Band, and they said, we need, can we have more Herman? She's like, no.
Herman is a white man in love with a Black woman in Alice's 1966 play, Wedding Band, a love-hate story in black and white. Alice refused to make changes. She didn't want it to be a play about what happened to a white man.
And I'm producing Alice Childress' new play, Wedding Band.
A Black woman was at the center of her story. Here, Alice is reading with actress, singer, and civil rights activist Abby Lincoln.
That's the only kind of love they want from us.
It's wrong to hate.
And it's wrong to love, too.
We got to be good, got to be 3 times as good, just to make...
Why? When they mistreat us, who cares? When we mistreat each other, who cares? Why we got to be so good for them?
Tell you, Julia Augustine, you hard-headed thing, 'cause they'll kill us if we not.
They doing it anyway. Last night I woke up thinking of all of my people that's been lynched. I dreamed of that all the dead Black men gathered together in spirit at the foot of my bed, standing in the corners of my room, quietly waiting for something. I've always been afraid of dead people, though I know they can't do any harm.
In 1974, ABC broadcast a production of Wedding Band starring Ruby Dee. In the South, some stations blocked it. Alice's plays were often seen as political, but she was writing about the world she knew.
Everybody is alive, right? they're not representing a point of view. They have a point of view, it springs from something. There may be a position that we're supposed to loathe, but I don't think that we're ever supposed to feel comfortable dismissing any of the people in her plays.
In her later work, Alice Childress turned to writing plays without white characters, focusing fully on Black lives. 1969's Wine in the Wilderness is set in Harlem with a riot going on outside. In this scene, Old Timer is looking to hide some loot left behind by rioters.
And Sonny Man calls this the people's revolution. A revolution should not be looting and stealing. Revolutions are for liberation.
It's a comedy with a little drama in it, right? And what I love most about this particular experience is that I hit the lottery and been able to cast Crystal Dickinson in the role of Tommy. Listen, full disclosure, we're married. We've known each other for 20 years when we met in grad school, but I've never seen Crystal better.
Tommy's apartment has been barricaded during the riot, and a young group of artsy intellectuals has invited her up. But Tomorrow Marie, that's Tommy's real name, begins to realize that they see her as a type, an uneducated local.
And there are other factors. What's wrong with me?
In directing this play, I looked through the script, and one thing I noticed was how many questions Tomorrow Marie asks. And she's one of the only persons in the play of the five who asks questions. The others have all the answers. But we see Tomorrow Marie, hopefully by the end of the play, as someone who is so much more evolved than the other well-educated type.
She wanted to write about people who were ordinary, who didn't finish grad school or college or high school, to show them as worthy of full attention.
Alice herself never finished high school. She had to work after her grandmother died. But she had a love of knowledge and later was a resident scholar at Harvard's Radcliffe College. Here, she remembers how her own journey as a writer began, soon after she moved to Harlem at age 9.
Even though I was with the American Negro Theater, I think my grandmother started me writing, really. And she would sit by the window with me and say, "There's a man going home. I wonder what his name is." And I'd give him a name, and then we'd say she'd ask how many children he had and where he worked and what he had done and so forth. And I don't think she called herself making me a writer. She was fascinated. Perhaps she should have been a writer also.
For decades, plays by Alice Childress were rarely produced, but she was always writing. In 1978, her award-winning young adult novel, A Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich, became a film starring Cicely Tyson.
Benji, you're driving me out of my mind.
Now her plays are being rediscovered by a new generation in a new time. Trouble in Mind finally made it to Broadway in 2021, 65 years after it was first optioned. In 2022, Wedding Band had an extended run at Theater for a New Audience in Brooklyn. Two River Theater in Red Bank opened their 22-23 season with Wine in the Wilderness, and at the same time, the Shakespeare Theater of New Jersey in Madison produced two of her one-acts, Florence and her 1970 play, Mojo, a Black love story.
I'm so excited to dive into these plays because it feels like a missing component. We talk about the classics of Tennessee Williams and Arthur Miller. Great playwrights that everybody totally embraces as part of the American theater tradition, and Alice Childress definitely belongs to stand with the great playwrights of America.
When a playwright is able to clearly articulate a truth about humanity, that will never get old.
Black American culture is American culture, and Black history is American history, and we are all in it together, and we are all trying to navigate, how we're going to go forward. So that's why I would go see Alice Childress.